Welcome to the MYS Virtual Hangout. Here's your host, MYS Music Director, Raúl Gómez.
Hello and welcome to the MYS Virtual Hangout number 65. I am very excited because tonight I get to share with you a conversation that I had recently with my good friend Scott Harrison. Scott is currently the Interim Executive Director of the Louisiana Philharmonic Orchestra in New Orleans, where he's also their Senior Strategic Facilitator. Before being in New Orleans, Scott worked in Hawaii, and before that he was in Los Angeles, where he was the Executive Director of the Los Angeles Chamber Orchestra. Before that he was in Detroit. He's done a bunch of amazing things. He's also a founding board member of BLUME Haiti. He's going to tell you all about that. Scott and I met way back in 2003. We were both musicians with what was then called the Youth Orchestra of the Americas. It's now called just the Orchestra of the Americas. But back then, we met. This was the orchestra's second ever summer residency and tour. And we became good friends along with a bunch of other people who were members of that orchestra that year. And on YouTube, I'm going to share this with you right now. On YouTube, there happens to be a documentary about that year with YOA. And I'm going to link that in the description of this video. And Scott didn't know that I was going to talk about this or even show you what I'm about to show you. But here is me in that documentary in 2003. And here is Scott also in that documentary. So check it out if you're interested. The Orchestra of the Americas is an amazing organization that I am still very much involved with, and I owe them a lot. It was really a life-changing experience. It's no exaggeration to say that. Let's welcome Scott, and I hope you enjoy our conversation. Scott Harrison, welcome to the MYS Virtual Hangout. How are you doing, my friend?
I am great, Raúl. It is so good to see you and to be talking in this format.
I know. You are currently in my previous hometown of New Orleans.
That's right. A great musical city.
It's such a great town. And when I heard that you were going there to work with the Louisiana Philharmonic, I was so excited for everybody, for the orchestra, for you, for the city. And I'm excited to talk about the awesome things that you have been doing with the LPO, as well as some of your other projects. And will you first of all share with our viewers, and of course our viewers are mostly young musicians from the Metropolitan Youth Symphony and their families and friends, how you and I met?
Well, yeah, I'm thinking it's actually so appropriate because we met as young musicians, maybe not as young as the musicians that you mentor and work with at MYS, but we weren't much older. We certainly weren't very much wiser. We were in an organization that was then called the Youth Orchestra of the Americas, and in that case, youth was referring to young adults, but now I think it's dropped the youth and it's just the Orchestra of the Americas. And it was in a wonderful organization that brought together musicians from all over the Western Hemisphere. We had, 25 or 30 countries represented. We had, easily 3 or 4 languages represented, English, Spanish, French, and I'm sure there was some Portuguese. And and it was just an experiment in sort of creating music, understanding, dignity, respect, and just a lot of joy through something that people share, which is this connection to playing classical music or playing in an orchestra or having some sort of instrumental training. And then a lot of things they don't share, which is growing up in some very vastly different environments and circumstances. So it was very eye-opening and very powerful for me. I mean, I think at the time 22 or 23, you were probably about the same age yourself. And I think in many ways, a lot of how I've situated my career since then is a direct outgrowth of those experiences and that learning that I had as a result of being an Orchestra of the Americas.
Yeah. Life-changing. I mean, all of us who were part of the early years of like exactly what you were saying, what was then called the Youth Orchestra of the Americas. I mean, so many of us, almost 20 years later, can you believe that? We're still in touch, we still work together. it's so cool because, we all travel the world together through music and with music, and we created all of these connections that, are with us to this day, as, this interview right now is evidence of.
Exactly.
Uh,
And I just got we had some really funny moments. I'm remembering the story where we were on the airplane. It was a charter airplane, and it was a little rickety, and it was having trouble taking off, which is not a very
not a
comforting
good sign.
thought. And they discovered, I don't know who the they is, but apparently the company, to save a minuscule amount of money, decided to pre-purchase all of the soda for the trips in advance, and then the plane was weighed down and loaded up with way much more soda than the plane could handle. So they essentially put all our lives in jeopardy to save $143 in soda costs over the course of the 6 weeks.
Oh man, that was one of many stories and adventures. And a previous guest of the MYS Hangouts was Jennifer Arnold, our good friend violist, who was also part of those years. And there's just so many stories. And I mean, wouldn't it be wonderful to just spend a whole day just retelling those stories from those years with all these amazing people?
But I think the lesson for the young people listening today is, because I still talk to Jen Arnold all the time. I learn from her. We share ideas. I talk to you all the time. I talk to so many folks. The relationships you're making now, the friendships you're building, are going to stay with you. So you never know how these people are going to stay with you through your life. And so it's also a really great lesson to just like treat everyone with respect and just really be open to everyone in your life, because they're going to come back and be a part of it in some way. And you're going to want to know that you're all on the same team, and not that you're still fighting any petty squabbles because you had some, unhealthy competition, or were just sort of a little too much in your own lane when you were focused on your goals.
Yeah. Yeah, that is excellent advice. We could just end the MYS Hangout right there with those words of wisdom. But everything you just said is absolutely true. I could not agree more. Scott, I'm going to inaugurate a brand new segment for the MYS Hangout that you didn't know about. We're going to do that right now. And the segment is called, What's Your Deal? And that's all. This is when I ask you, Scott Harrison, what's your deal?
What's my deal? Yeah. Gosh, what is my deal?
Interpret that however you want.
My best deal is Amazon Prime at Whole Foods, because I save with my Amazon Prime Visa card, because then I save an extra 5% on top of the already low prices with Amazon Prime. Okay. So that's my number one deal.
Very good. And I expect a commission check from Amazon and Whole Foods for that plug. Yeah.
I think my real deal is my deal is just being open and just assuming that there's something good in everything. And the thing I don't know about is the thing that maybe I should most want to know about. And I think about that musically. I think about that artistically. I think about that in terms of reading or learning or tuning into the news and the world around me. I think about that in terms of friendships and relationships. I'm trying to force myself to always be as open as possible, because I find so much more good comes out of just having that palette that's just receptive to the world, as opposed to when I just stay in a lane and assume, okay, this is my thing, this is what I do, this is what I know, don't get in the way.
Yes. And you've had already an extraordinary career in arts administration, and also you're a spectacular musician yourself. I don't know how often you play your bassoon these days. I imagine not much.
Not too much.
Right.
Yeah.
Would you mind, for our viewers who are not familiar with you or your work, to first of all kind of summarize what you do these days?
Exactly. Yeah, I'd be happy to. I'm an arts administrator, an arts manager. When I'm being boldest, I say that I'm an arts leader. I have spent most of my professional career at orchestras, though a number of those orchestras also operated performing arts centers, so gave me exposure to some more multidisciplinary work as well. But essentially, I help lead and shape and drive the organizations that I am at to achieve their goals, to live up to their missions, to connect with their communities. I was, for a number of years, I was the executive director of Los Angeles Chamber Orchestra, a really flexible, fantastic, cool organization in LA that serves all of LA County through some very inventive programs. And about 2 years ago, I decided to leave that and to take a little right turn and do some consulting work and work with a wider group of organizations and help them on their paths to becoming as successful or as realized as they could be. And so the thing that I sort of stumbled into, because what I thought was going to happen, like a lot of folks who might consult and provide services or expertise or resources to other organizations, it's often in smaller engagements. You might come in for a month to help with a specific project. They need help reorganizing how the board and the management communicate. They need help putting together a strategic plan. They need help building out a new operational model. But what happened is one of the first sort of conversations I found myself in was with the Hawaii Symphony in Honolulu, and they needed an interim executive director. They were in the midst of a search for their new executive director, and they were going to have a little bit of a break between when the previous executive director was leaving and the new one was starting. So they needed someone to provide that interim leadership. So I went down there for what ended up being 6 months. A lesson there is, never say no anytime someone asks you to spend a few months in Hawaii, working. That's a pretty good gig to take. But no, it's a fascinating organization. I helped them on this path to sort of maintaining momentum, building into the future, and finding and onboarding their great new executive directors so they could move forward. Well, here in Louisiana, it's sort of similar with the Louisiana Philharmonic. We're in transition. It was a little bit different here because COVID was setting in, so they knew that the transition might take a little bit longer. They didn't want to rush into finding that next executive director. So someone like me could come in, help sort of keep things stable, maintain operations, but also really figure out what's next. How do we adapt to COVID? How do we stay active and present in the community? And how do we set a sort of a momentum and a environment that can attract the most exciting executive director to take that position and then move the organization long-term into the future? And so I've been here about 7 months, and I'll probably be here about another 4 or 5 because we're actually now talking to some really good candidates for the permanent executive director role. And hopefully over the summer, we'll make that transition and handoff and really help the LPO move into what it's going to do next. I'll just mention briefly the other part of my life that's really important to me is on the philanthropic side, on my own sort of community side. I'm a founding board member of an organization called BLUME Haiti. And BLUME Haiti works to build the music education ecosystem in Haiti in partnership with a number of wonderful music programs, more than 40 of them throughout the country, urban and rural, large and small, established and new. And as I think many people who work in the music education sphere sort of know from their own work, the goal is music on the one hand, but more importantly, the goal is creativity and youth and potential and development. So it's about creating pathways in a country that is filled with beautiful resources and amazing people and a lot of pride, but unfortunately has a lot of obstacles and barriers around resources, around institutions, around just access. And unfortunately, a number of those caused by external factors. But nonetheless, it is creating those pathways and opportunities and creating something really good in the life of young people through music, that for the handful who decide to make a life in music, they can do that. But for most of them who don't, they are sort of energized and inspired by the experience they had participating in music as a youth to be part of the future of an even brighter and bolder Haiti.
Yes. And Haiti is, I have to say, I've only been twice, but that was enough for Haiti to become one of my favorite countries in the whole world. And the first time I was there, and I was there to work with the Orchestra of the Americas, I had no idea of all the incredible talent, musical talent. Well, about like outside of classical music or orchestral instruments. That's a bit better known. But just the amazing things happening in Haiti with orchestral instruments, and not only playing what we know as classical music, right, but also using those instruments and using that training to create and play their own music, which is fantastic.
Yeah, one of the things I find, and you were sort of alluding to this, is that in Haiti, there's not so much of a hang-up of genre. I'm a classical musician, I'm a jazz musician, I'm a pop musician, I'm a this musician. It's more like you're just a musician, man. And so it's like, no matter what path you train in, you just want to be involved in everything. And so it's a beautiful spirit. And I think a lot of the compositions that come out of Haiti reflect that sort of mixing pot, that stew. And in some sense, I think that's a very Caribbean idea. I don't know if you feel like this extends to Costa Rica too, but it's a very Caribbean idea because you have cultures that are syncretic, right? That are about all these different blends coming in. Some of it forced, some of it not forced, some of it indigenous, some of it from the outside. But from a cultural standpoint, there's this idea if we take whatever we like, right, and just add it into the mix, and we don't get hung up on sort of calling it this, that, or the other. Am I right? Do you think? Do you
Well,
have that
I,
feeling?
I would I would agree with that, but more in recent times. In more
Yeah.
recent times, I think at least in Costa Rica, and I see this in other Latin American countries, there has been more of a conscious effort to celebrate our own culture and our own
Yeah.
music, because I feel like in decades prior to that, maybe there was a feeling of, oh, our stuff is not as good. We should play
Yeah.
Beethoven. You know what I mean? Which,
Yeah.
I mean, everybody should get to know Beethoven, but I feel like now there's more of a resurgence of that, let's say, pride, cultural pride, and to celebrate what's ours, and to really allow all of these different uh, styles or languages or whatever to come together and create sometimes something new.
Yeah.
That leans a little bit more on indigenous sounds or leans a little bit more in European or Western tradition, but there's more of that celebration now than I think we had before. But yes, that's something that I absolutely saw in Haiti the times that I visited.
Yeah.
There's a video on the YouTube channel of BLUME Haiti. It's about a 2-minute video that shows what you guys are about. Let's share that with our viewers, and we'll come back after that. I'm just so inspired and impressed by the work that BLUME Haiti has been doing there since 2012 officially, but the work has been happening before that.
Yeah, I mean, our founder, Janet Anthony, has been going down to Haiti for, I think, at least 25 years. I believe it was 94, 95 she went down for the first time. She's recently retired, but she was the longtime cello professor at Lawrence Conservatory at Lawrence University in Appleton, Wisconsin. An amazing musician, but just a more amazing person. And I think it's Janet's spirit that infuses all of us, all the co-founders who were part of that first board with her and everyone who's now joined since, is the idea that that whole sense that she had been in the country for 18, 19 years before she even thought about starting BLUME Haiti. And then it was like, let's maintain that spirit in everything we do. Let's be humble, let's ask questions, let's be in service of the Haitian youth and communities and populations that we're working with, and let's never assume we know better. Let's never assume that we have the answer. Let's assume that we have the desire and we have some skills and knowledge that can be helpful and can be put to use if it's offered in the right way and with the right attitude. And so, yeah, I mean, the organization is I think we're then 9 years old. We're almost going to be a decade, and we've grown by leaps and bounds. And I feel like our change is starting to reach systemic levels, which feels really good.
I think it's super important that you guys have local Haitian board members too.
Yes,
like that's crucial.
You're exactly right. I mean, we are actually in the coming year. We're hoping to finally hire our first program manager, and it will be someone on the ground in Haiti, a Haitian national, and to really create that opportunity to have someone working directly in the programs, and hopefully over time, 2, 3, 4, 5 people working directly in the programs who themselves are young Haitians who have graduated from music programs and want to have a professional career continuing to serve through music.
Yeah, it's so cool. So we'll share the website, we'll share everything so that people can go and check out BLUME Haiti online. I want to go back to New Orleans now for a little bit. First of all, where in New Orleans that you guys find a place to live? What neighborhood?
So we're uptown. We're right by Audubon Park.
Nice.
We're just a block off Chapatoulas. It's great. It's like there's a lot of green space. We can walk to some really great shops and restaurants, and it's like and it's just a great spirit. I mean, you just talk about a place where you get to know your neighbors, and everyone's really friendly, and there's just a really good energy. I love this neighborhood.
Yeah. I love that part of town too. The last place that I lived in New Orleans was just by Tulane University.
Oh yeah,
that
so not
neighborhood.
too far away.
So yeah, we could walk to Audubon Park. As a matter of fact, I jogged. That's where I went to jog. It's such a beautiful place.
Oh, it is. You probably went down onto the Fly by the Mississippi River.
Yeah. All the way to the levee and lots of great restaurants and bars and places.
Yeah.
And let's talk about the work that you've been doing with the LPO, because one of the really exciting things that you've been doing is the Orpheum sessions.
Yeah.
In the midst of this pandemic. So will you share about that a little bit? And then we have a video to share with our viewers.
Oh, cool. Well, because the video will tell it much better than I can in words, but I am so proud of this orchestra. We have been so active and so imaginative during the pandemic. And I think it started with the board who, when I came in, just essentially the message was 100% like, we need to be here for our community. We need to be active. We need to figure something out. And so use that as the starting point. Not, are we going to be open? Are we going to be closed? It was, no, we're going to be here. Assume that, and now let's figure out how to be here. I wouldn't want to be here if that wasn't the attitude to begin with, but I just love it. And so the Orpheum sessions was our pivot for our full orchestra series. And like a lot of environments, of course, we can't have the full orchestra together, but we could safely have about 35 musicians together. The Orpheum Theater is our home venue. It's a beautiful, I guess it's actually just turned 100 this year, 100-year-old theater in downtown New Orleans, and we were able to sort of turn it into our studio. And so the idea sessions kind of plays off that idea a little bit. And what we did is we were able to they can remove the ground floor of seats and create an extended sort of flat stage. They actually have that capability in case they're doing a wedding or a dance party. But the truth is, for us, it turned the entire ground floor of the Orpheum into one large recording studio. And we were able to spread out a 35-person orchestra. We were able to mic to sort of overcome the acoustical challenges of being spread out over that wide a space. And we just dug in, and repertoire-wise, we just went for it. Like, we just said, we're going to do some really interesting things. So we're working with a lot of new composers, including our creative partner, Courtney Bryan, who is just, I think, one of the coolest voices out there in classical music right now, and other New Orleans composers like Tucker Fuller, Nicholas Payton, the trumpeter, the jazz trumpeter. We're premiering a new work by him in a couple weeks on this series. So we've leaned into new music. We've explored composers of the past who perhaps haven't gotten the spotlight or the due that they deserve. So exploring African-American composers, Latinx composers, women composers who had been underrepresented on our programs and probably all orchestral, programs and repertoires in the past. And we've reached out across genres. So it's not only classical, but we've connected with some really cool bands and other acts in town. And the two prime ones that we did in the Orpheum sessions this year, one is Tank and the Bangas, who are like this unclassifiable sort of funk, soul, R&B.
So much, man.
Yeah, aren't they great?
Yes.
And Tariona Tank Bell, their lead singer, is just like something else. It's poetry. It's beautiful. So we did a session with them, and we just recorded one that's going to come out in a couple weeks with a band called Sweet Crude. I don't know if you got to know them when you were here.
Are you kidding me? Jack and Sam and everybody, I love them. I love their music too. I was
probably
around
jammed
when
with
they
them.
were getting started, man.
Yeah.
I love them.
Yeah, and for folks who don't know, they celebrate Louisiana French history. So
Yeah.
they sort of keep alive the Louisiana French language with a sound that is very eclectic and very sort of like has a little bit of techno in it, has a little bit of
Yeah,
folk in it, has almost like a little bit of like Madonna or Coldplay in it, like those sounds I hear kind of through it.
So unique.
So,
Well, we'll link a bunch of videos of Street Crude in the description of this video. Yeah, man, and Tank and the Bangas. So they won the NPR Music Tiny Desk contest in 2017, and then that video has 11 million views.
yeah.
And then they were nominated for Best New Artist for the 2020 Grammys. When I saw on social media that the LPO and they were, working together, I was so excited, and
Yeah.
I'm equally excited to share this video with our viewers right now.
Hey everybody, I'm Tariana Tank Ball,
I'm Norman Spence.
I'm Albert Allenbeck.
And I'm Joshua Johnson.
and we are Tank and the Bangers. We're very excited to share our songs from Green Balloon and Friend Goes with you, so please enjoy. Was that too much? I too tough for thinking that everything I did wasn't simply not enough. Was I supposed to tell you that I've grown? Or there's certain things that you should have known? Doesn't winter turn to spring? Don't you see colors changing things? You say I say too much. You say my leaves ain't green enough. You say you can't take that I've changed. Weren't you supposed to do the same? Oh, was I different? I'm missing the pieces that drew you to me. Too naive for such things. Make believe I don't see. How long can I be so green, so green? No forest, just trees, floating not free. You say I say too much. You say my leaves ain't green enough. You say you can't take that I've changed. Weren't you supposed to do the same?
It also gives me a lot of joy, Scott, to see Carlos Miguel Prieto conducting here.
I know. Talk about another good friend of both of ours. Talk about those antecedents in Orchestra of the Americas. I mean, it's really nice when you can just sort of get right into a groove with the conductor because you know him well with the music director. You have that relationship. But Carlos is like, I mean, I think he's the perfect music director for so many times, but particularly for right now when flexibility is paramount, when openness is key, when just having just a voracious appetite for figure out what is next. I mean, Carlos is the best music director you could hope for, because right now Carlos's attitude is, yes, let's do it, let's try it, and he's open to ideas. He's a great partner with me, with the musicians, with the board, with the community. It's just absolutely terrific. So he's been a real driving force, and in fact, you talk about just a great sort of spirit of doing anything right now. The other thing he's been doing this year, which I know he's really enjoyed, is he's picked up his violin and he's actually played with the orchestra and played in chamber music quite a bit. One of the series that we've started that he's really helped us to sort of bring into its own is called Music at the Museum. So parallel to the Orpheum sessions, we are doing in-person concerts in New Orleans. They're all outdoors at museums or other related historic sites. And of course, in New Orleans, there's no shortage of museums and historic sites. And so those are chamber music focused for reduced socially distanced audiences. But Carlos has played on a number of those. And in fact, with this attitude of like, nothing in the pandemic should be merely a response. Everything should be learning something for the future. This Music at the Museum series won't go away. We're going to expand it. And even when we can go back to being indoors at museums, we're going to continue to lean to this idea of creating music in interesting spaces to reach people we wouldn't normally reach.
Yes. That is so exciting. And I cannot wait to see what the LPO is going to be doing, next season and the following season with whoever, comes and takes over the position of executive director. Very, very exciting. And I applaud that attitude too. Throughout the pandemic, we shouldn't just be trying to patch things. We should find things that we can bring with us into the future to enrich the field and increase access. And that's exactly, I think, the spirit that will not only carry us through this, but allow the industry to thrive.
Yeah.
There's no other way. We have to be innovative. We have to just, grab onto the opportunity. This is a huge disruption.
Yeah.
Right? And with big disruption comes opportunity for change.
Exactly.
And that's why when I saw that you were in New Orleans, I was like, this is exactly right. This is exactly right.
And I just want to say, MYS, you guys have inspired me. I remember early in the pandemic, I saw the virtual gala that y'all put together. And it was really before many organizations had thought to do something like that. And I'm seeing a ton of them since. But I think you guys have been on the cutting edge. And I just think, all of us, it's all of us who are trying and figuring things out are winners right now. And the thing that I tell the staff here a lot is like, there is only one wrong answer. And the wrong answer is to do nothing. And anything you do is actually the right answer. You cannot fail if you try something, if you put yourself out there, if you put us out there. Yeah, if it doesn't go quite to plan, that's okay. We'll look at it, we'll learn, we'll discuss it, we'll improve it. But gosh, the only wrong thing is doing nothing. And as long as you're sort of out there, and I hope that's the spirit the young people at MYS have right now, as they're going through their studies, their music, their extracurriculars, whatever they're doing in life, like just put yourself out there and just keep doing things, and it's going to be okay, because you'll learn. The worst thing that will happen is you'll stumble and you'll learn.
Yes, that's exactly right. You know what? I am constantly inspired by our young musicians. It's been over a year that we've been online. Okay, actually, a year and 1 week ago was our last in-person concert. Everybody was posting their COVID-versary last performance before lockdown.
Wow.
Ours was with Regina Carter at the Arlene Schnitzer Theater here in Portland, Oregon. Concerto for Jazz, Violin, and Orchestra by David Schiff. It was extraordinary. We barely squeezed in before lockdown. People were really starting to worry, and we just caught the tail end of the before times for that concert. And yeah, I mean, soon after, we just jumped right into the unknown, and there's been a ton of learning, but all throughout this whole process, I'm constantly inspired by our young musicians, not only through my work with them with MYS, but also with Old Classical Portland and our program On Deck with Young Musicians, where I and a couple of my colleagues, we get to interview young musicians for the radio, and their stories, their passions, their drive, their grit. Really, that's why we're here. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing, and that's why we have all of these conductors and coaches and our board of directors and volunteers we're all fueled by our young musicians' drive. And I do wish sometimes that all of us, because many of us do, kept that kind of youthful excitement
Yeah.
about our art, right? All throughout our careers. It's easy to become a little jaded sometimes,
Yeah.
but you look at young musicians, and that's where it's at.
Yeah.
Optimism. So as we get ready to wrap up, two more things, and one of them is a segment that I love called Sound Advice. And you've already given so much great advice for young musicians and for anybody who's watching. But my prompt to you for this segment is, if you, Scott Harrison, could travel back in time and find yourself in high school, what advice would you have for yourself?
Well, one of them would be, don't think you can grow a beard and a goatee before you really can. Now I can do it quite well, just like you, but back then I was kind of faking it till I made it. But, it's interesting. I thought about this because the team prepped me and I wanted to really have a gem of beauty. And I struggled at first because, first of all, I started thinking, well, actually, I have more advice for myself as a young professional than as a teenager, because part of what I started thinking was what you said earlier was, you know what, when you're young, you still are just willing to go for it. You still have that openness. You still have that creativity. And maybe it is around the end of high school, college, where it starts to get clamped down a little bit. So my advice maybe first and foremost is for those folks at the end of their high school career, sort of going out to college, and don't lose that part of your youth, your innocence, your joie de vivre, your fun, your zaniness. As I get older, I try to retap and connect more with that. But what I really started thinking a little more broadly is, first of all, right now, I like a lot of more mature individuals in age, if nothing else. Find myself trying to be inspired by young people and realizing they have a lot to teach us. And I'm trying not to be the person who says, what do you know, because you're fill in the blank, 25, 15, whatever age you want to give, and say, actually, you know a lot because you're 25 or 15 or whatever age, because you're at a vanguard that I'm not out. You're thinking ahead. You've grown up in a more equitable, thoughtful, respectful time, just like all of us did compared to any generation that came before us. So I try to be very open and listen. So what I want to say, as I think all that is to boil down to, I believe my real piece of advice is this, and it's complicated, but I think all advice is complicated. And that is, I encourage young people, on the one hand, to not let anyone older in their life give them the wrong advice or send them down the wrong path or cut off their creativity or their empathy. So don't let those cranky, jaded old voices get in the way. That's part one. But part two is, at the same time, be willing to listen and ask a lot of questions and learn from, and don't think you know it all, which I often did when I was younger, and don't think you have the answer, but ask and really be inquisitive and curious and listen. And if you can then triangulate or extrapolate between those two poles and over time figure out, where's the advice jaded and where is this someone who just really doesn't have my best interest in mind and is just trying to shut me down, I'm going to shut that out. But on the other hand, where's this someone who really has figured something out that I haven't, and if I just sit and listen, I could pick something from this. That's a tough concept, but I know how smart your young people in MYS are and all around the country. I know they're capable of it. That's my advice. Try to live between both those poles and don't let the bad advice get to you, but be open to all that good advice and let that just fill your life with possibilities.
I think that's wonderful. And you know what? Both of those are very closely related, because if you're a young person and you hear from, let's say an older voice, something that you're not sure, is this good advice? Is this just, not what I should be hearing? Go find somebody you trust.
Yeah.
and talk to them, ask them questions. Okay.
Yeah.
I guess depending on the situation, you have to say names, but hey, somebody told me this. What do you think?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's wonderful advice, and very closely related to each other. So thank you for that, Scott.
Yeah, I mean, Raúl, it makes me think, have you ever watched any of the videos or read any of the articles by Brene Brown? She's made some really popular TED Talks, and she has a Netflix special. And she's actually, I believe, an organizational psychologist, but she's sort of now in, I would say, more of what the self-help sort of zone and just really helping empower people and sort of find purpose in their lives. And she talks about how we're so good at doubting the advice that comes from the people we trust the most. Like we have this like, it's a form of bias. It's like it's an immediacy or like a recency or a closeness bias. If I know Raúl, then obviously if he tells me that what I did is great, or on the flip side, if he tells me that what I did isn't so great, well, what does he know? He's too close to me. And then if there's someone who I don't know at all and they tell me either that I'm great or that I'm bad, we say, well, that's got to be the right advice because I don't know them. So they clearly know what they're talking about. And what you've just said is reminding our young folks and everybody, like flip that script, like trust the people close to you. So if you hear some advice from the outside, if it sounds good or if it sounds bad, get that second opinion and say, hey, Raúl that I know well, or hey, mom, or hey, dad, or hey, older brother, or hey, teacher that I really respect, like I heard this and this sounds interesting, but can you help me process it? So I think that thought from Brene Brown came back into my mind of like, don't dismiss advice or feedback that comes from the people closest to you who actually at the end of the day are oftentimes the one looking out for you the most.
That's beautiful. I love that. Thank you for that, Scott. And then finally, before I have to let you go, we have our last segment called The Plug. And I believe that there are two things that we would love to hear from you about. One has to do with BLUME Haiti and one has to do with the LPO. Exactly.
Well, with BLUME Haiti, I wanted to plug this fabulous performance series that we have. It's called Zanmi Nu Yo. Zanmi is the Haitian Creole word for friends, and my Haitian Creole is not terrific, but I believe the sense is something like friends being together or we're all together is how you might translate that phrase. It's a digital recital series. We're featuring great Haitian musicians across all genres. We had the Jacmel Cool Jazz Trio. We had a fantastic young violinist recently, Echelle Jean Noel. We've got a lot more performances coming up. A fantastic Haitian conductor, educator. I believe he's a violist too. Rudy Jean Perrault, who I think is now based in the States. I believe he's up in Minnesota. He's leading the next one, though by the time this airs, I think that will have passed. Every third Sunday of the month, there is one of these live streams on our Facebook page. You can always go back and watch them afterwards. So go to facebook.com/BLUME Haiti and please check out Zanmi Nu Yo and hear and support these great Haitian artists. We're supporting them. It's a paid opportunity, a professional gig for them, which is great. And we encourage people to make a donation in support of the series. That's sort of like your ticket, and just really participate in it. It's wonderful. You hear great music. You can help support the music education ecosystem in Haiti, and you can just have a really beautiful Sunday with it.
I have a note here that there's a recital coming up on Sunday, April 11th at 1 p.m. Pacific. So we'll make sure to link that.
I apologize. It's the second. I said the third Sunday. It's the second Sunday of each month. So that's why it would be Sunday.
So we just had one, and the next one will be April 11th. And we'll make sure to link this, and we'll send it out also on our weekly announcements to the entire MYS community.
Cool.
And finally, something very exciting coming up with the LPO.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I don't even know where to start. We just have so many cool Orpheum session programs out there, but we talked about it earlier. So I just want to encourage folks to go online to check out our Orpheum sessions. We just released a concert with the violinist Jenny Coe. I'm sure she's been with the Oregon Symphony before. I don't know if she's worked with the young people at MYS. She's just one of the most thoughtful and creative violinists out there. I mentioned earlier the name Courtney Bryan, our creative partner / composer in residence. It's the digital premiere of her Concerto Syzygy is featured on the series in a concert alongside a work by Carlos Simon, based out of Atlanta, and Aaron Copeland. And there's many more great Orpheum sessions after that. The Sweet Crude one is coming up. The Tank and the Bangers one is still going. You can check out a clip of that on our LPO YouTube page. We're going to have the premiere of Nicholas Payton's Jazz Trumpet Concerto. We're going to feature some great music by Louise Ferenc, conducted by Lina Gonzalez Granados. And then sometime later in the season, Carlos is going to close out the season with a program with a Beethoven second with the orchestra sitting in the round, which I think is a very cool way of leaning into the studio environment. So go to lpomusic.com, check out the Orpheum sessions, and enjoy some great music while you're at home.
Very nice. We will do that, and we'll send this out also to all of our people here in Portland, Oregon. Scott Harrison, thank you for spending time with us. It's so great to see you. Send my best to all of my dear friends at the Louisiana Philharmonic.
I will.
Orchestra, and enjoy those po' boys, man.
Thanks, Raúl. I will, and I'm really honored to be here. Thanks for having me on the show.
Thank you for watching. I hope you will subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't done that yet. We have great virtual performances coming up. And on April 9 at 7 p.m., that's a Friday, April 9, is the MYS Virtual Gala. It's free and open. Anybody can tune in. I hope you will. Add this to your calendar. April 9, 7 p.m., the MYS Virtual Gala. I hope to see you there. Until then, take care.